Okay, so making sure that we have our props. You have 1 to 2 blocks, and then a blanket and a strap. So we might not need the strap, but we'll see how it goes. So let's just start sitting. And if I turn from the back, just to show you what I'm doing with my feet, I'm just going to curl my toes under. I can even lift my knees up like this. And as I get my toes curled, showing from the front, I can actually start to pull the outer edges of my feet and my little toes away while keeping my big toes stuck down. And once I get the most space between the toes, come down and then sit right onto your heels. Now there's a couple of ways to amend this if it's a little bit too tense. So the first thing is you can put your block or two or blanket between your butt and your heels. Another way is to make sure that your block is underneath your knees, but in this case, you're just going to have to keep your knees together. So however you can tolerate this the most, get a comfortable seat. Comfortable, of course, being a very loose term in this case. Make sure that you sit upright, relax your hands to your lap, relax your jaw, and just take the first 5 breaths, not to just hurry up and get through it, but to start to really kind of distill the quality of the exhale. And doing nothing else but that, not even really showing too much interest in your inhale. The way that our system works is if we just devote the attention to exhaling, and we make sure that it's, as the term goes, is fundamental, that it really leads to the absolute deepest portion of your exhale and the bottom of your lungs, then the inhale will actually have momentum of its own. And so that's why most of the practice asks us to just invest in the exhale. And we do this, we also clear out a lot of old waste product that our body needs to get rid of with every breath, which is a good way to also get rid of inflammation in the body, is to make sure your respiratory habits are efficient and productive. And now come forward, point your toes back, and then sit on your feet with the front top of the feet and the shins on the ground. And again, you can put a block or another object between your heels and your butt if your knees don't like to flex too much. But then as you sit here, again, relaxing your shoulders down, keeping your chest elevated, just allow gravity to really impress your weight to the floor. And notice how your right shin as compared to your left shin, how they impress. And then just see how the rest of the body coordinates its alignment according to the weight distribution you've kind of allocated to your legs and your hips. And make sure that you still keep providing more exhalation. And it doesn't have to be rushed, it doesn't have to be forced. It just has to be a little bit more attentive. And if you really observe your exhale carefully, you notice that in the beginning, it's almost like the top of a whirlpool. It's very broad, it's very tangible. And as your exhale starts to proceed all the way down towards the end, like a whirlpool, it starts to kind of taper down to a narrow point as far as its perceptibility. And when you really get down to the end of your exhale, there's just this little thin thread, so to say, of sensation left that you really have to be sensitive to feel into. And this is the reason why so many of us tend to overlook completing an exhale, is because the end of it is very difficult to discern as opposed to the beginning. And so we oftentimes have a tendency to think that the exhale is complete, and we get busy right on to the next inhale without the exhale actually having been completed. So if we always leave a little bit of residual exhale volume in our lungs with every breath, that leaves a residual amount of basically toxicity in the body because you're exhaling what is defined as a toxin. Okay. And then come forward back onto your hands, curl your toes back under, And then one more time in the toe sit. And I'm just turning to the side so you can see how your toes fold. Whenever you do this, just make sure you use your fingers to curl the little toes under as well. And again, keep your body upright, keep your shoulders back. And we're definitely not going to spend as much time sitting on the toes as sitting on the top of the feet, but reinvest in your exhale again. Of all of the techniques that were given in this practice, the technique of this careful observation of your head, your face, the behavior of your mouth and your eyes and so forth, all of that gives us insight into where reactivity really comes from, where resistance to experience not just comes from, but where resistance to experience is perpetuated and even elevated. And if we just simply take care of releasing and relaxing the face and all of its various structures, this release experience will start to bleed down into the rest of the body. Okay, now again, come forward onto the top of the feet, point your toes back, sit back on the heels again. If you had an object between your glutes and your heels before, you can always reduce that object or take it away entirely if your knees are a little warmer. But again, let your shoulders relax. Keep your eyes closed. And notice something else. As you have your eyes closed, can you tell which way your eyes are pointing? And so right now, if you just try while keeping your eyes closed to either look way up, like you're looking up to the ceiling without tilting your head, you do notice that your eyes feel different. You can actually tell the position they're directed towards. And so if you point your gaze down, this actually sets up more of a neurological chain reaction that helps you keep more of your mental absorption into the details of the body, into the sensations of the body. And feeling the body, by the way, awareness of the body is known to be a neurological shortcut to getting more into our parasympathetic state. Okay, now we're going to come forward, and then from here, come down onto all fours, or 12 onto all fours. Okay, step your right foot forward between the hands, and then bring your left knee to the mat, bringing your hands up and onto the hips. And just start in this position first. Use your hands against your pelvis to attempt to elevate your chest up a little bit higher. So if you had a tabletop that you were pushing your hands on right next to the hips, just use your pelvis in the same way. So you use the power of your arms to basically create more space between your armpits and hips, which gives you total body length. And a lot of that comes down to how much length and space we provide to the spine. Okay, so now staying here in this low lunge, take your left hand, hold the outer portion of your right thigh, and place your right hand with the palm facing in, fingertips facing down, right in the middle of your pelvis. So if you see from the back, my hand is basically between both glutes, and my fingers are facing the same direction as my tailbone. So I'm not on my lower back. Here's my lower back. You want to be basically over the pelvis, which is your glutes. That's what covers the back of the pelvis. So when we inhale, I want you to really consider pressing down into the pelvis with the right hand. So again, to keep building elevation. And as you exhale, use your left arm to just create a little bit more twist. But don't think about twisting in this pose in the beginning of class just for the sake of acquiring maximum depth and maximum range of motion. Think of depth in the way that the tradition of yoga is defined, a deep pose or an advanced pose, just simply in terms of precision. And so as you inhale and lengthen, use that precise observation, perspective, to tell if the right side of the torso and the left side of the torso are as long as each other. So if they have comparative length between the left and right. And oftentimes what happens when we're twisting the side that we're twisting to here, the right, that side of the body will tend to collapse. So in reality, we tend to twist in the side bend. So you always want to put that side in check and make sure that the space between the right armpit and hip is proportional to the space between the left armpit and hip. Let's take this one last breath out. Make sure you stay with it until you know your exhale is completed. And then inhale, come back to center. Bring your hands down, and then step your left foot forward. And then come on up. And again, starting with the hands on the pelvis. I always kind of default to saying the hips, but those of you that have been to the workshops the last couple weekends, it's really the pelvis. When we put our hands here, that's what we're actually feeling. So as you press off the pelvis, which is really the bridge between your upper and lower body, notice how your upper body gets to decompress off that bridge. You can use your own strength, your own arms, if you know where to push and how to do it, to traction your body, to decompress all of the effects that gravity puts on the body over the course of our life. Keep your right glute engaged. Hold your left thigh with your right hand. Place your left palm right against the sacrum so the fingers point down. Good. And again, for just a little bit easier kind of stability of the front leg, if you lift your toes, just the virtue of lifting the toes keeps your front foot more prominent in your attention. So if you just keep them lifted, it'll be harder to forget about them. So again, we inhale, use the left arm in this case to push down and start to kind of catapult your torso up. And when you exhale, start to gently but consistently, use the right arm to provide the twisting element. And see this for a second. Check this out on yourself. Can you already tell if the twist here to the left has more depth, more range than twisting to the right? And the way that yoga sees injury, dysfunction in the body is very much in alignment with the way that Western medicine, especially the physical therapy end of Western medicine, sees wellness, which is simply has to do with symmetry of the body. And it's not so much the case that injury and suffering and pain could be laid at the feet of being tight or inflexible. But it's more the case that if you're symmetrical, being symmetrical and tight is actually far better than being asymmetrical, flexible. Inhale, come back to center. Good, bring your left leg down. Step your right leg forward again. And this time, let's lift the back knee up. And just staying here for a moment. Keep your hands on the ground. Make sure your hands are at wrists, specifically below the shoulders exactly. And get a nice grip into the floor with your fingertips. So imagine you're actually clawing down into the mat as if you want to grab a chunk of earth right out of the floor. Keep your front toes light. Now if you want to try it, do it hand by hand. Place one and then both hands on your front thigh. And before you come all the way upright, come to like this halfway point. Almost as if you have a straight line extending from the back leg through the top of the head. And just see how your left leg feels here. And I want to remind you here, engage your left glute. And when we're going to come up in a moment, when we're going to lift the torso up to a vertical position, make sure that you can keep your left glute here engaged as your main crane, your main power source that helps you get the body upright, other than pushing away from your front leg with your arms. So then start to slowly come up, and you can slow this down as much as you want to make sure that your left glute action is coordinated to the project of moving your torso. So your torso is supported on the pelvis. Your glute is the biggest muscle in your pelvis. So without the glute, the pelvis won't move correctly and the spine won't sit correctly. And by the time you're up here, you can place your hands back onto the glutes. Just stay here for 2 more breaths. Just kind of getting the baseline of what high lunge should feel like. Good. And then bring your hands down, bring your left knee down, Step your right leg back, step your left leg forward. Okay. Again, lift your right knee. And another thing, if you look at where your front foot goes, say if you draw an imaginary straight line from your left heel back, you want to make sure that your left heel does not in any way intersect with the back foot. Okay, so now keep the back leg strong and sharp. Place one and then both hands onto your front thigh and come up like halfway. So you can again feel that straight line from the back leg through the top of the head. And then very slowly, as slowly as you need to, don't rush yourself just to keep up with the practice. Make sure you're coordinating your movements according to your own observation and sensation of the right actions. Keep your right glute strong, hands on the hips, 3 more breaths. Relax the jaw, relax your throat. Try not to squeeze your eyelids. Just imagine you have a nice, comfortable, sleepy face on. And then slowly bring the hands down, right knee down, and then bring your knees back to the floor, both knees. Sit back on the heels for a moment. Face the front. And once you're sitting on the heels or on your block, a blanket, bolster, we'll take a little side bend. So starting with your right hand, put your right hand actually on your right hip. And then right next to where your right hip is, so in alignment to it, place your right hand on the floor so the fingers face away. And then walk your right fingertips to the right. It won't be long before you start to notice your left butt lifting off the left heel. As soon as it's lost contact completely, plant your right palm down, lift your left arm up, and then start to use your right palm and arm to push to the right, thereby bringing your left sit bone back to the left heel a little bit closer. So all we're doing with the right arm is we're pushing, it's like you're grabbing the floor underneath you, next to you, and you're pushing it away from the body. So that's all the right arm is doing. For now, the left arm going up, keep your top palm, left palm facing the right, make sure the elbows stay straight, and then as you start to exhale, this already might be the limit to where your body is comfortable extending to, flexing to. And if you want to add a little bit more, don't bend your top elbow at all. Just start to carefully bend the right elbow. And maybe do this an inch, just incrementally at first. When you get that bend, initial part of the bend into your right elbow, make sure that you're still pushing that part of your mat away from the body. So you're continuously driving your left sit bone down to your left heel. And maybe you can bend your elbow until just maybe it comes to the floor. And again, if your elbow doesn't come to the floor, there's no reason to have any guilt about it. There's no reason to make any associations about how healthy or not you may be. And especially because yoga is traditionally a metaphysical, spiritual, psychological practice. No need to reflect on whether or not your depth of flexibility says anything about you personally. This is just how we start to work with the body, and as we unravel all of the chronic tension that might be stayed in the body, might be recorded in the body, we start to actually unravel our mind, our consciousness. And there's actually really, really fascinating, again, neuroscience that can back this up. One more deep breath out. Inhale, slowly come up. Push your left hand to the left. Again, maybe start with your left hand on your left hip. And right next to your left hip, push your hand down. And again, start to walk your fingertips away until your right butt loses contact with the right heel. And then you plant your left palm down. Again, feel what it means to push away with your left arm and to tap the right sit bone to the right heel. And then after that, keep your right arm up, keep your top palm facing the left. Good. And if you're so inclined, before you bend the elbow, here's what I would say to it. So if you can get your right arm, carry it over sideways, at least to where your arm falls on the same line as the right side of the body, so you can see the right side of my body is in a slight bit of contour. So if I can get my arm, top arm, to match the contour of the right side of my torso, then that's probably a good time to start thinking about bending the left elbow. So if you're doing that, just make sure you're continuously pressing away with your left arm and driving the right sit bone down to the right heel. And eventually, if your left elbow does come all the way down, still keep your top elbow straight and keep driving that right sitting bone into the heel. If you reach out even further to your fingertips, what you'll feel is your shoulder muscles elevating up towards your ear, which is a good thing to feel. That's exactly what your shoulder blade needs to do anytime your arm is overhead. Relax the jaw as we stay here for about 3 more breaths. Unraveling tension is a way, an avenue to unraveling mental, cognitive, psychological, maybe even spiritual tension, as we're told. Inhale, slowly come up. Very good. Now, let's go back to some lunges. You're going to step your right foot forward. Start with keep your left knee down rather, but bring both arms to the inside of your front leg. And at first, you're just at arm's distance from the ground. So the front view of this, just like this. Okay. And then turn your front toes to the right so that the angle of your second and third toe and the angle of your right thigh is at about 1 or 2 o'clock. Don't go too much further than that for now. Okay. So you can stay at arm's distance to the ground, or if you like, you can start bringing your elbows down, but start with the outer elbow. So left elbow down first, and if it's conceivable, bring the right elbow down from there. You can again try to create more distance between your front heel and your back knee by lifting the back knee and setting it back a little bit further. Okay, so you're going to stay at arm's distance, at upper arm's distance from the ground on the elbows, or on the hands at full arm's distance. To add to this, whether you're on your elbows or not, you're going to lift your back knee up. And then once you lift your back knee up, lift your front toes, and keep the front toes lifted, not just the front toes, but the whole front of the front foot lifted. And just make sure you continuously guide your right thigh away from you. So keeping the arms down, the forearms down, or your hands. Imagine you had a third arm pressing your right leg away from you. So not having one, use your own hip muscles in the leg to do the same thing. And if you keep lifting the front of your right foot, you can actually dig the heel into the floor a little bit more. And imagine you're pulling the heel backwards as another little suggestion to push your right thigh or guide your right thigh away from the body. Good, now bring the back knee down. Perfect. Don't move yet. Keep the back knee where it is. Keep the front foot where it is. You're just up on the hands. And then place your right hand on your right thigh and just start this twist. And when you first twist, what's easy to do is get so encumbered and almost kind of like so hypnotized by the twist that we lose perspective of what's going on in the bottom arm. So if you look down while twisting and you try to look at your own left shoulder, if you can't see it, that means you're kind of collapsing into the shoulder. And I want you to think about pressing away from it. So the objective is to keep your left arm and shoulder as distant from the midline of your body as possible. Okay? Now, while continuing turning to the right, make sure that your head is in the right place, and oftentimes we can have a tendency to look or to have our head stick out forward too much as we twist. So what you want to make sure to do is to keep your neck in line to the rest of the spine. So if you pull the chin back, lift the chest up, and then you turn your head from there, your spine will be set up in a much better position to give you a little bit more success out of your twist. So holding the twist in the upper body, here's the next step. Bend your back knee slowly. See if you can take the foot off the floor, and then reach the foot with your right hand. If that's too far for you, what you can start with is you can put a belt, start with a small loop, maybe just enough to make it around your foot. You put that around your foot before anything. You can put it around your ankle, bring the strap forward, and then as you start to twist, you can just pull your foot and then use the belt as you climb your hand down the belt to pull your leg closer to your left butt. If you can grab your foot, then grab your foot, and where we're actually aiming this left heel is towards the left glute. So see how close you can pull your heel towards your glute while still staying pretty wrapped up in your twist. To protect your ankle on the left foot while pulling the heel in, make sure that you're still resisting with the toes the opposite direction. Let's take about 2 more cycles here. Good. And then release. And we'll switch sides. Right leg down. Then step your left leg forward. Bring both arms to the inside of your front leg, just like we did on the previous side. And just see how things feel so far. If you can get a little bit more distance between the front foot and the back knee, try to really extend your right knee back. Make that the main objective of this lunge. And then from here, either coming down to one elbow, right elbow first preferably, or 2 elbows, as long as your front foot, your toes, are still pointing in the opposite to what we had set up on the right foot. So toes and knee, toes and thigh, to about a 10 or 11 o'clock position. You can already start to lift your toes, and not only that, but begin to lift the whole front part of your foot. Add to this, if you're ready, the lift of your back knee. Now here's the thing, if lifting your back knee hurts your lower back, I would say come up onto the hands and lift the back knee. And if being on the hands and lifting the back knee still makes your lower back hurt, then just keep the knee down, but stay on the hands anyways. And within this back bend, here's what I also would suggest thinking about. We're in a flex position at the hips. That's obvious. But what I really want you to encourage your body to do is to drive your chest forward as if you're still doing a back bend, even within this deep of a lunge. So it's you're intimating those little articulations of cobra pose to your system, even though you don't want to get into a full back bend. So you're matching up the qualities of a good lunge with a little hint of back bend as a way to maintain balance. Okay, now bring the back knee down. Lift your torso back up. And then keeping your left foot off to the left, place your left hand on your left thigh and start to twist to the left. And again, just make sure you're not collapsing into the right shoulder by pressing the right arm away from you. So if you look down, you should be able to see your shoulder. If you can't, this is happening. You're collapsing. So you want to press away. Good. Now, once you've gotten into a full enough twist, keep the twist. Start to bend the back knee. Lift the foot off the ground and grab your foot. Or you can again grab your belt, just to show this again. Put it around your right foot first. Keep the belt out in front of you. And then when you bend the back knee, you can just hold on to the belt. But if you can hold the heel, hold the heel. Continuously pulling your right heel towards your right glute. And once you get the right heel and the right glute together, you can take that whole operation and lunge a little bit closer to the ground. So it's kind of like you're letting your pelvis sway down a little closer to the mat. Just these last 2 breaths, make sure your toes are pulling back against the effort of your arm. That's just the knee stabilizing, ankle stabilizing strategy. And then release. Nice work. So from here, you take your belt off, you get it. And I'm going to show this setup from the back. You're going to need a block, maybe 2. Okay, so first thing is, maybe I'll show this part from the front. Bear with me here. You're going to move your right knee forward first, so almost between the hands. And then you're going to lift your back knee and tilt your right foot, just like this, so it's on the left side of your mat. So knees in the middle, foot is on the left side of the mat. Then keep that right knee open, as I have here. And we're going to try to fit this left knee inside the crease of the right knee. So then you bend your knee, bring your foot forward, just kind of try to tuck it in there. You can move the right leg back against it, left leg forward into it. So that's the general premise that we're going to start. And then first thing, this is where I can show you from the back. You're going to start to sit down. And as you sit, you might find it more comfortable to initially just sit on that left foot. So you see how my foot is turned to the left? And I'm pretty much sitting on my heel. If that's too much for your knee to bend, put a block on your foot or on your heel and sit on that. But just make sure the toes on the left foot are active and you're digging the outer edge of the foot into the floor. So that's with the block if you need a little bit more of a prop up. Now if you want to go a little bit further, this is again relevant to look from the back. You're going to go back onto the hands, lift your hips up, and then I want you to think about swinging your butt, so left sit bone, all the way to the left as far as you can get, and then almost like you want to sit sideways. You bring your left sit bone down first, and then once you take your hands off the floor, your right sit bone will settle down on its own. And then you can just sit right there. And you can still do this with a block in the same way. You set your butt way to the left, sit on the left sit bone first, and then you balance out. Okay? Keep your belt handy for this. So again, this is something that you want to see from the back. I'm going to teach this as if you can't reach your hands and grab them yet. So you're going to take your left arm behind you, internally rotate the left arm, and then bend the elbow, and first bring your forearm across your back. Just see how that goes. You want to try to get your elbow and shoulder on the left side in a nice straight vertical plane. So if it's helpful, use your right hand, grab onto the left elbow, and tuck that left elbow in a bit more. Now next part, if this isn't really that intense yet, you're going to start to kind of flop or crawl or squirm your left hand up towards the head, to the base of the neck. And this is where you grab your belt. If you don't have a belt, use a little hand towel. Take your right arm up, and you want to make sure that your bicep points back. So my palm, my bicep, the crook of my elbow all point back. And then I lift my shoulder blade up, right? So it's not pulling the shoulder away from the ear, it's actually elevating everything. And then you're going to bend the right elbow, and just past that one end, the free end of your belt or towel, the bottom hand. Right? And this is it. You just stay right there. And if you want to work on a little bit more flexibility, just crawl your hands, use both sets of fingers, and start approaching the hands towards each other by crawling them down that object. And if you could just get one finger hold, let go of the belt, and just keep that one finger hold. If you can get more, you get more. However many fingers you do have, you want to make sure that the set of every finger, right, because all of your fingers have pairs, so the pair of every finger should be exerting the same amount of strength onto each other. And you'll notice if you have more than one finger attached to each other. And you'll notice that like one hand or one finger begins to dominate on the other. And you want to keep everything equally strong, equally precise, so that you don't keep building on the dominance and the strengths that you have. You can actually strengthen some of your weaknesses. This is another great way not to only just create shoulder flexibility, but this is actually how we can create a little bit more integrity in the way that our fingers work, because our fingers are ultimately the function of our forearms, and the health of our wrists and fingers depend on the same set of muscles, same set of even neurological maps. Good, release the top arm, bring the right arm down first, make a moderately tight fist with your left hand, and then slowly take your left hand out, turn it as far as you can the opposite direction, and then you come forward. Good, bring your legs back, start on all fours again. Now this time we're going to bring the left leg forward, the left knee forward. So left knee goes right between the hands, stays in the middle of the mat. I want you to lift your back knee, turn your foot, the left foot, over to the right side of the mat. And then we get this knee joint space open here. And I want you to slowly slide the right knee to tuck in to the space of the left knee. And when you get those close together, again, first, just sitting down carefully, make sure that you get your butt to your foot. So you can say you can have your right sit bone on the heel and left sit bone more over the ball of the foot. Or just simply take a block again, put that over your right heel and sit on that. So whatever you're doing, still make sure that your right foot is engaged by pulling the toes back, like I'm doing here with the front foot, as well as pushing the outer edge of the foot down, just like this. Okay? If you don't need the block, don't use the block. We'll stay here for a couple of moments. And what we're looking for eventually is the ability to try to stack the knees up vertically. Now this is going to be limited by one of two things, or both, which is just the lack of flexibility in your hip rotators. Those deep 6 external rotators, those of you that went to the workshop can remember. The other part, if you have a lot of just muscle in thigh flesh and calf flesh, there's going to be a limit on how well you can stack your knees together. But irrelevant of the issue, here's a nice way to try to encourage that. You place your left hand on your top thigh, you're going to be pressing the left thigh to the right, and then your right hand can go on the right thigh, so it's like you're going to be pushing the hands towards each other, which actually pushes the legs in the direction that we need it to go to. So you're going to have a lot more success pushing the top leg, of course. So as I lift the knee a little bit, I use my left arm to keep pushing the knee over, and then I relax and sit again. Okay, so you guys remember what we did already from the previous slide, what I showed you from the back. Now to go a little bit further, come forward onto your hands. And you see how this left foot is over on the right side of the mat? The hope is that we can get the right foot to the left side of the mat. So then swing your butt all the way to the right. If the previous side was really tight for you, already have a block ready for your bum. But you're going to swing your right butt way over to the right, land on the right sit bone first, and then once you let your hands go, the left sit bone will come down a little more naturally. Just stay here, okay? If this doesn't feel like as intense as it could be, then come down to the mat. Make sure again that you swing your butt over and then you let your butt come down. And we'll just sit here. You can place your hands on your front thigh or your knee. Keep your chest lifted and keep your shoulders drawn back. Letting your weight do the work is sometimes some of the really hardest and most challenging experiences in yoga. And what I'm sure everybody's noticing is that there isn't too much comfort that you can find in the middle of an active practice, even if it's a therapeutic practice like this. And the objective is actually never supposed to be to find comfort. So the position that we want to find ourselves in is, where can I still maximize my safety but not try to maximize my comfort. Because safety and comfort aren't the same thing. Obviously, because we know if you sit on a couch all day for like 50 years in a row, that's very safe in a certain way. And it's very comfortable in a certain way. But at the same time, by sitting on a couch your whole life, you're actually making your body a little bit more susceptible to wear and tear. Because we're not putting challenge into the muscles, we're not putting shock and challenge onto our skeletal frame. And the way that the body works is it needs these challenges on a daily basis in order to be able to navigate physical space. And the body is this kind of an instrument. And this is, again, a scientific fact as well as an ancient traditional truism, where it's little bits of specific stress, kind of designed, customized stress, tailored stress, that makes us work better, that makes our body and our minds work a little bit more efficiently. And I've talked about this in terms of the 1 to 10 scale of discomfort and that intensity of stretching. And most poses, when we're looking for flexibility, we're building this kind of stretching architecture, you want to basically look at a 6 to 7 intensity scale between that 1 to 10. So not the most pain possible, but not completely comfortable either. Come forward onto your hands. That was a longer one. Bring your right leg back first, left leg back second. Good? Okay. So from here, let's set up actually on the back. So first, just laying on your back. Make sure you get comfortable. Keep your knees bent, feet flat on the floor. Okay. You're going to heel and toe your right foot to the right. So if I turn towards the camera, it looks like this. So I'm heel and toe my right foot to the right. Once you have your foot off of your mat, the distance you want your right foot to be from where it was should be pretty much the length of your shin bone, right? So my foot was here, and it's going to end up here. And that's the length of my shin if I were to place my shin parallel on the ground. So when you get your foot there, keep your foot in place, and just allow the right thigh and knee to start descending down towards the floor. It's perfectly okay if your right hip and your right side of the spine have lifted. If you want to go a little bit further with this, it's not a big shock to the system. You're going to place your left ankle on your right knee. And don't do anything active with this left leg. Just allow the weight of your leg to dictate the descent and depth of this right leg. And every exhale that you go through, you can just close your eyes, coming now towards the end of our practice. Just see how the weight of your left leg encourages the descending of the right. We're internally rotating the right leg. In internal rotation, if you remember this, it'll help you in yoga class you take. Internal rotation gives you more length in your psoas muscle, which is your deepest muscle, deepest voluntary muscle in the body. Down the streets, basically called your hip flexor. Now, when you internally rotate your leg, you're taking where the psoas attaches away from where it originates. And the psoas has a really important role to play because it doesn't just only flex the hip. Our psoas plays a huge role in our respiratory system. And being that it's this deepest voluntary muscle, means that it attaches on the spine, or more specifically, it originates from the spine. And it happens to originate, interestingly enough, exactly where the diaphragm originates from. And if you ever look at an anatomical skeletal model, you can see that the fibers of the diaphragm insertion, attachment, run into the fibers of where the psoas originate. So that means the function of our diaphragm, which is our main breathing muscle, intersects with the function of our hip flexors. And having a day and age that we all live in where people are under so much stress, especially with the events of the last couple months, where everything is so heightened, our psoas muscles have become almost accustomed to this constant level of stress, so they become chronically restricted because of that. And because they have become chronically restricted, they start to exert that restriction on their environment. And that's why I brought up the diaphragm, because it shares muscle fibers with the diaphragm. So if the psoas is restricted and stressed, it's going to impart some of that anxiety onto how your diaphragm works. So just from the impact of stress, you have a diminishment of your hips and your respiratory system all in one. And then you take your left foot off the right knee slowly, carefully heel and toe your right foot back to center. And then repeating on the left, heel and toe your left foot to the left. And once your foot has gotten about one shin's length away from where it began, take your right foot, place it on the left knee, and just let the right leg relax so it naturally encourages the descent of your left knee. Again, okay for your left side of the pelvis and left side of the torso to roll off the mat. You keep your hands on your torso somewhere. You put your hands on your leg. One thing I would say, place your left hand on your left thigh. Without looking at it, I want you to just kind of slide your hand along your leg and notice if your knee is in line with your hip. If the plane of your left thigh is in line to the plane of the left side of your body. And if it's not, if you don't feel that to be the case, adjust it so that it is. And then once you think you made a good adjustment, just lift your head, look at the left thigh for a moment, and confirm to see if your perception was on track. And again, just relax yourself down and exhibit the same kind of interest in your exhales. And I know I took a little bit longer on the previous side to describe this shared relationship between the diaphragm and the psoas. The interesting thing about our psoas muscle is, as some experts have put it, because it's the deepest muscle, it's unlike any other muscle in the body. Right? Because all of our other skeletal muscles, you can pretty much see. They don't go that deep. The only thing that sits that deep, because the psoas sits right on the spine, is your organs, your glands. So the psoas has actually been compared to having an organic organ type of essence and architecture to it, because it has some quality of smooth muscle, right? Like your organs. Your organs have a smooth muscle structure. And the way that it works is it can be voluntary, the same way that your bicep is when you say want to bend your elbow or like lift a cup from the table. You're communicating to your bicep directly. You can communicate to your psoas that same way, but it also has inputs from your autonomic nervous system. It has inputs from your subconscious mind, which means that it can get triggered to flexion without you ever having to have deliberately acted on that account. So that's where stress comes in. Because stress is what our body responds to protect. And our psoas muscle is one of our key muscles that kind of draws the body in and protects us from any outside harm. Take the right foot off the left knee, walk your left foot back to center. All right, good. So we got a couple of minutes left, and I want to end with a nice little pose here. We're going to end with shoulder stand. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to just turn the camera towards the wall here for a second. So here's what I want you to do. And you can watch first and then repeat afterwards. So you're going to start right up against the wall with your hip. You're going to lay back onto the opposite elbow and then swing your legs up the wall. And then use your elbows, use your upper body, use your feet against the wall. I want you to try to get yourself all the way up against the wall as close as you can so that your butt is actually touching the wall. Okay, once you've gotten there, you're going to bend your knees, put your feet flat on the wall. Don't bend your knees too much, just bend your knees as minimally as necessary to get your feet flat. And by pushing into the wall and pulling down on the wall, you're going to lift your pelvis up. And then once your pelvis is lifted, try not to look back at the screen anymore, unless you just want to watch this as a demonstration. Because once your torso is lifted off the ground, even this much, it's very important not to turn your head to try to look sideways. So here, where you want to start is to maintain a strict line position, inline position, of the plumb line of your head with the plumb line of your body. So the tip of your nose is in line with the belly button. Once you've made sure of that, lifting your hips up a little higher, interlace your fingers behind you, and you do one of these rocking motions from shoulder to shoulder, and each shoulder that lifts, see if you can get the opposite tucked under a little bit more. Now, if the wall is a little bit too close to allow you to extend your arms all the way, you can slide back a couple of inches. It's not a problem. Okay. Now, once you're here, press your forearms into the mat, press your elbows into the mat, lift your right leg up first, and then press your right heel into the wall. Right leg straight, and then lift your left leg straight up off the wall, and then press the left heel into the wall. And keeping the front of the feet off the wall, keep the soles of your feet off the wall, just keep feeding your heels into the wall to keep your pelvis from collapsing. And I don't want you to think about getting a vertical line from the hips all the way down to the shoulders and neck. I want you to be at a diagonal. So do just the bare minimum that you need to make sure there's a nice straight line from the heels to the shoulders. And this does two really incredible things. By pushing your heels into the wall this way, you're acting from the domain of your hip extensors. Those of you that went to the workshop knows what those are. So those are your hamstrings and your glutes. So you're using your primary muscles of back bending in the legs as you do this, but you're also doing a good inversion with an element of forward bend in the neck. So you really are blending some of the best of what back bend has to offer with some of the best of what forward bends have to offer. And to keep safe, you want to make sure that you're not actually imposing much pressure on the neck this way. And that's why I want to keep our body just on a nice diagonal. So vertical isn't necessary. Okay, and then slowly let your heels slide down the wall. You can do that with your legs straight, or you can do that with your legs bent. And once your hips have come to the floor, you can bend your knees. Just let your knees stay, your feet stay on the wall. Let your knees and thighs stay towards the body. Or option two, you can cross your shins and just keep your legs straight. And we'll take a couple of breaths here. Shoulder stands are really an incredible class of poses. And if you ever had the experience of doing a very proper Iyengar type of practice, when you do shoulder stand in Iyengar yoga, you have to do it on props, on a bunch of blankets, you use a belt, you use bolsters and blocks, and it's all to kind of edify safety. But when we're laying flat on the mat, the way to encourage safety is to actually discourage that vertical line that we oftentimes hear being insisted upon. Because the main objective, as far as safety goes, is to prevent your neck from flexing too much. So if you get into a vertical kind of shoulder stand without blankets, where your chest is running up against your chin because you're pressing yourself into such a vertical position, that can start to undermine the integrity of your neck. Because your neck, in its natural state, is in a back bend shape. It's at what's called a lordosis. And when we practice flexion of the neck, as we do in shoulder stand, we want to make sure not to go too far away from that state of lordosis. So let's try this for a second round. I'll describe to you another perspective. So once you lift up, again, interlace your fingers, extend your elbows and upper arms to the floor, and then extend your leg one at a time to the wall. Keep your knees straight, keep feeding your heels against the wall to keep your hips lifted off it. So again, if you notice, you can just kind of try to press your torso off the wall a little bit further to get your hips more vertical with the shoulder. You notice that your chest comes closer to the chin. And that's exactly what I was talking about needing to avoid. And so if you're in this pose right now, what I want you to kind of feel into, you can't really use your hands, you can't look at it, is can you tell what's happening on the back of the neck? And what I really want you to get into is maintaining a little bit of space between the back of the neck and the floor. So you have the top of the neck, you have the bottom of the neck, right? You feel that. Where is the center of your neck? That's the part we want to make sure doesn't touch the ground. So there's like a little bridge or tunnel that you form between the ground and the back of your neck. And as we take the next 5 breaths, give your glutes a good clenching, a good engagement as a way to keep pressing your heels into the wall, your legs into the wall. If you're getting fatigued on the legs doing this, that's a good sign. It means you're using the muscles of back bending. And then let's slowly come on down. And again, either keep your legs straight on the wall and cross the shins, or you can bend your knees, sit your feet flat on the wall, and just keep your thighs right up against your torso. Relax the jaw, relax your throat. Just let everything start to kind of settle back into the body. If you need a couple more minutes at the wall like this before moving, take them. Otherwise, all I'm going to ask you to do is start to kind of slide yourself back away from the wall by pushing your feet into it until you can straighten your legs completely. And this now sets us up for a rest. This is where your blanket or your towel will come in handy. We're going to place that right underneath your skull. Relax your arms to the sides and just let things unravel on their own. If this feels too intense or just uncomfortable in your lower back, laying down this way, you can always bend your knees and keep your feet flat on the ground. And if this position with your knees bent is preferable, you might even enjoy a little bit more if you tie a belt around your knees that keeps your knees together. You take as long as you need to in this Shavasana since class is already ending. If you have time for it, the traditional description encouragement of Shavasana and how to practice it to its good conclusion is to just relax until you feel that you can carry some of this essence of Shavasana out with you when you roll over to your side and go back to the rest of your Monday. Just make sure your eyes are closed, not from a point of tension or contrivance, it's just relaxation that relaxes your eyelids. Relax your forehead. Actually notice the state and condition of your skin as it covers your skull. Thank you for practicing today with me. Remember, the protocol to move out of Shavasana is always to turn to your side so that you never do a sit-up right out of it. And then walk around when you get out, unless there's an emergency, of course. Walk around very softly and tenderly to hold on to this space of softness and comfort and gratitude that's really at the heart of yoga, which is the way to love ourselves. Thank you. Namaste.